What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Jenks Island podcast, the only NFL podcast where you get your takes from washed-up Division III cornerback and his friends. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, joined again by my great friend and co-host, Ty. In today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the head coaching carousel, the frenzy that is the 2026 head coaching search, and we're going to be giving a top 10 picks for the our top 10 pick mock draft, first one of the season. Before we really dive into all of the guys after the Super Bowl, we're going to start looking into the guys and giving an episode every week with our top guys at each position. But in this one first, real quick, before we get into the head coaching search, Ty, what are your thoughts on this past week's games? Obviously, the Broncos lost in pretty upsetting fashion, right? It was obviously underwhelming without Bo, but even with the circumstances without Bo, you still had a fight in the game and still very well potentially could have won that game. What are your thoughts on the Broncos game first?
Yeah, I mean, you win that game, you're going to just go on and lose anyways because of the way that Stidham's playing. He's just, he's not going to be able to beat one of those teams on the NFC side unless your defense has a Herculean effort like they did against the Patriots. And I mean, the defense played awesome. And that game said more to me about the Patriots than it did about the Broncos, right? I had a lot of faith coming into that game and Drake May and that offense. And after that game, I was like, wow, this – offense has a lot of work to go. And I know Denver's defense is phenomenal, but, going up against Seattle's defense, who is also a phenomenal defense, does not bode well for New England. And, you can make excuses about the weather and whatever, but that first half before the snow hit, New England was not able to do anything. They didn't move the ball at all. The only time they scored a touchdown was when Stidham gifted them the ball inside the 10-yard line. And then they got a field goal on a fourth down that they didn't even get. And somehow the officials botched that replay. So, and even the fumble was questionable, but whatever, you got to take it as is. You can't score 10 points. You shouldn't win a football game. But it was ugly. I think that if we had J.K. Dobbins in that game, it could have been a different story too. You saw them lean more on Ramondre Stevenson, kind of up the gut runs, and we just didn't have that ability with R.J. Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin. So, you take it on the chest, and I don't know. I think I had higher expectations for Stidham. That first drive looked really great. Obviously, the weather played an impact, but it's just the Patriots' defense. Credit to them too; they were flying around, but their offense was an embarrassment. And they're going to go against Seattle now, who played in a tough game against the Rams, and I think the Rams would have embarrassed them too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on all fronts there. My only thing was in this game, I do think that, like you said, they were missing J.K. Dobbins. That was to be expected. I think we both said that RJ Harvey isn't going to be a bell cow guy for that team. He's solid in the pass game and outside runs, but inside the tackles, he had a few good runs there, right? He had a couple of good runs where he made a guy miss and still got a good 5 yards. But every single play, you can't really rely on him to do that. I will say my biggest takeaway from this game is that reffing consistency and transparency is desperately needed across the NFL in all of its games. We had this game, obviously the Stidham fumble. It probably would have. First of all, as soon as that play happened, the refs on the field, one of them blew it dead and one of them let it play out. One of them was signaling, incomplete pass. One of them was signaling that it was still live and in play. That can't happen. On that kind of play, you really should let it play out no matter what, and then go from there and review it. Second of all, after they reviewed it, said it was an incomplete pass. The Broncos are on the field, and then all of a sudden on the broadcast, you just hear a ref go, after review, instant review or whatever it is called nowadays, it's been overturned to a fumble and it's the Patriots ball. And it wasn't challenged. It wasn't it was completely random review process. And when you look at the play, not only was Stidham's looked like he was throwing it forward, it looked like the ball got hit backwards. So that's what made it be a backwards pass. And I think that the transparency, right, is really what made that situation that most frustrating for me, is because the week before in the Bills-Broncos game, they didn't really take any look at the call and they didn't really communicate what was going on with that incomplete or with the interception. Whereas this week, there wasn't any communication and then it's just overturned in the blink of an eye and the Patriots are on the field. So I think that is a really big stain on the NFL refereeing right now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the UFL, they've the NFL's partnered with the UFL to test out some of these rules. Hence why, the new kickoff rule came about.
Mhm.
Why doesn't the NFL do the same thing that the UFL does with officiating, right? You hear the whole process. You hear, I forget who the referee that does the UFL games on
I think
ESPN, but
isn't
you
it Blandino? Wasn't it him?
Yes, Dean Blandino. Yeah, and you hear his conversations with the referees. There's no reason that we can't hear the referee conversations with whoever's in New York at the NFL
Mhm.
offices, and when they come in for that instant review or whatever it is, right? There's no reason that we can't hear that. Unless you're trying to hide something,
Exactly.
it's only going to help out the NFL in giving clarity on a lot of these things. If I have an understanding of your thought process and how you got through something, I'm more likely to be like, okay, you know what? I see it differently, but at least I can understand where you're coming at. If you just change something, like you said, in that instant where it was a fumble, it was an incomplete pass, and then it was a fumble again, a
Mhm.
lot of people are going to have questions about it. And then same thing on the fourth down there, it seemed clear as day to everyone in the world looking at that replay, he didn't have the first down.
Mhm.
Now, if you told me, okay, well, we didn't blow the whistle and there was a little bit more forward progress and he got it, fine, but that's not what we hear. So I think that the NFL needs to utilize their partnership with the UFL and adopt that piece of referee.
Yes, especially in this modern age of sports betting, right? Where everything and everyone is always looking for a conspiracy of this game is rigged, this game's rigged, that was a rigged call, things like that. If you provide that extra level of transparency, that reduces that uncertainty in the league that much more. So again, like you just said, unless you're trying to cover something, which I don't think the NFL is, it just prevents that from ever happening and popping up in people's minds more and more. And also, let me just say this: Gene Steratore is absolutely horrific on the call of just whenever it's reviewed, and there you go. Hey, Gene, what did you think? He's gonna agree with that call on the field 10 out of 10 times, and it's pretty funny to watch. He's changed his mind a couple times on that call, and it was to agree with the call on the field both times, and it was just the guy's
My favorite one's
unbelievable.
Troy Aikman and the guy on ESPN. I forget who it is for Monday Night Football, but Troy
Mhm.
Aikman's always disagreeing with him, and it just gets there's always an
Yeah, it's
awkward silence
a
when the
little
two of
a
them
bit of a
fight.
bicker. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it is great. It is great. I will say, I think that each broadcast, they're doing like a good job of having that guy right to agree or disagree on the calls on the field, but at the same time, unless it's like, they're actually giving some insight, whereas Gene Steratore is just, yeah, I agree. I agree with what they said, and it's just every single time. It's just frustrating. But
And
anyway,
not all of
sorry,
those
go ahead.
referees that do the broadcasts agree every time like he does,
Exactly.
right? They'll say, "Oh, I disagree with the call on the field."
Yeah.
You can do that. You're not being paid by the NFL. You're being paid by CBS. So I don't get it.
Steratore is going to Steratore. That's all I'll say. But anyways, moving on, Ty, the Rams Seahawks game, really, really great game up until the end. And I think the Rams and the Seahawks, both teams, you play each other 3 times, knew each other's number on defense. They were really driving down at will most of the game. The Rams got stalled a couple of times, and I think that there was a couple decisions that they should have gone for 2 towards the end of the game when they're coming back, things like that. McVay made a couple of mistakes, but all in all, it was a really, really solid game from both teams. Sam Darnold didn't end up turning the ball over like we thought he might against this Rams defense. That's pretty opportunistic. And then on the other side, the Rams, their offense played really well again. Puka Nacua had another great game per usual. And it was a great shootout. So in a opposition of this Broncos Patriots game that was pretty ugly, we get a great game in this one. What are your thoughts on this? And do you think that the Seahawks are the favorite or do you think that the Seahawks are justifiably the favorites over the Patriots going into this Super Bowl?
Yeah, I 100% think that justifiably the favorites, right? They came out and offensive, we know they're a great defensive team, but offensively, they played at such a high level. And we saw the other team that's going to be in the Super Bowl come out and lay a dud on offense. And,
Mhm.
we saw their best corner get cooked by Denver's fourth receiver. So, there's definitely some concerns. Obviously, their defense did fly around, but Gonzo, I mean, yeah, that's horrific. And they're going to, and all Patriots fans will come back and say, well, he got the pick later on. Jared Stidham threw him a
It
pop fly
was
into center
it was
field.
bad. Yeah.
It was the worst throw I've ever seen. But anyways, back to Seattle. Seattle, the biggest takeaway for me was Sam Darnold, right? Because he played
Mhm.
so well. Everyone came in to the season, to the postseason, saying Sam Darnold will crumble in clutch moments in the playoffs. He can't do it, right? And he came out and he balled, right? 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, like no interceptions. He played as perfect as you could want out of a quarterback at this stage in the season, for the money that he's making and the team that he's on, right? He didn't let that defense down. And the defense has believed in him all throughout the season, right? Like there's been times you saw the text messages that came out between DeMarcus Lawrence and Des Bryant. Des Bryant kind of said in those texts, like, hey man, like, Sam's probably not gonna like be great. And DeMarcus Lawrence was like, nah, Sam's got us. And that turned out, all that faith and belief turned out to be true. And now they're in the Super Bowl. And I mean, he played well. Kenneth Walker in his first time being like the lead back,
Oh yeah.
Without Charbonnet, he played well, 19 carries. I think he had 60 yards. He played well. And JSN, I mean, he's unguardable. He's unguardable. I don't know what New England's going to do about him. Their solution will probably be to try to put Christian Gonzalez on him. But if you get him in the slot, he's a weapon. He's a problem. No one's going to be able to cover him. Marcus Jones will not be able to cover this guy. He is really creeping. And I've kind of talked about this a few times. I talked going into the season about how good he could be. We talked about this in the middle of the season. He's creeping up on Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as the best receiver in the NFL. I know Puka's up there too, but what JSN has done and the ascension that he's had on this team that, Clint Kubiak wants to run the football too. And he's like the dude, 10 catches, 150 yards. Like it's super duper impressive. And I think he's going to be a problem in the Super Bowl. So I definitely think it's justifiable if the offense can play like this and the defense that we know that they can be under Mike McDonald, fly around, force turnovers. It's going to be a problem. And Drake May, right? He didn't turn the football over against Denver. He played pretty well, but it was a more conservative, play style throughout, hand off the football a ton. Go back to that Houston game, right? How many times did he fumble? The Seattle defense is going to get after him. They're going to force a couple turnovers. So.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. As soon as we saw that Broncos Patriots game, I was going into that Rams Seahawks game thinking there's whoever wins this is probably going to win by at least 10 plus points. Like that's just how I was feeling about the Patriots team, especially since the Patriots team throughout this playoffs haven't looked great in any of their games. And they played 3 teams that all looked very, very poor on offense in all 3 of those games. And the Broncos, it was just due to injury, right? Like I think like your quarterback going down, that's brutal.
And
brutal
beat. They lose that game by a lot.
Yeah. Like I just
think for 100 yards.
Yeah. And I think the big thing was a lot of people talk about, the snow and the end of the game. It's pissed me off is I've seen numerous quarterbacks go into the snow and have decent games, at least even above average games. And the snow is not what caused either of those offenses to just absolutely crumble. It was
and Jarrett Stidham outplayed Drake May outside of the turnovers. Like you just look at the yardage, the touchdown. Like he outplayed him. How does Drake May getting outplayed by Jarrett Stidham in the AFC Championship game?
And honestly, if they call that fumble, an incomplete pass, like because it was hit backwards by the guy's hands, they don't score a touchdown the whole game, like you just said. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I do think that the Seahawks are easily the favorites going into the Super Bowl, and we'll break that down completely next week. Anyways, moving on into the head coaching carousel of 2026. There are 10 openings, and 8 of them have been filled so far. Ty, do you have a list of rankings of each guy or each team? What is your rankings so far?
Yeah, starting at number 8, I got Todd Monken, the guy who was announced today for the Cleveland Browns. I just don't have a ton of faith in him. We've kind of seen him in Baltimore falter in key moments, whether it's, having Lamar Jackson throw the ball 30 times in a playoff game, not giving the ball to Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter. I don't know. I just don't have a ton of faith in him. And I know he's had some success with young quarterbacks, but they don't have a young quarterback there that I think is going to be the long-term option either. Maybe they don't explore that this offseason, but, I don't know. I just don't have a ton of faith in Todd Monken. At 7, I have Jeff Hafley. I like Hafley. I think he's going to be a fine coach. I think more so it depends on, how well Bobby Slowick can call this offense. Slowick kind of did fall apart in Houston after that first year and got fired, but he does have, the familiarity with that team because he was an assistant last year. But, Hafley, it left to be seen, what he can do because when Micah Parsons went down, that defense got significantly worse in Green Bay as well. At 6, I got Mike McCarthy. It just feels like another Mike Tomlin. I know Mike McCarthy has had a ton of success, but I think having him so low on this list probably says more about the roster as well. Like,
I think that's fair.
it's a decent hire, but you know that hiring McCarthy, they're not going to change anything. If you hired a young guy like a Steelhouse or whoever it may be, you know that you're going to kind of go into rebuilding mode and have the ability to accelerate that because you have a good coach. You're not rebuilding with Mike McCarthy. So
Hmm.
more of the same in Pittsburgh is what I imagine. At 5, Joe Brady, similar
Yeah.
in the more of the same, right? I like Joe Brady as a head coach, or just as a young, offensive mind. I think he would have been better suited going somewhere else because I think this just means that there's going to be continuity in Buffalo, right? I think the
Yep.
larger issues are in team building. Joe Shane, he's in New York. Brandon Beane,
Brandon Bean. Yeah. Yeah.
Joe Shane used to
Similar.
be, they both
Yeah.
suck. Brandon Beane, and the owner, they go out and blame Sean McDermott for drafting Keon Coleman.
It's
The
terrible.
clips come
Yeah.
out that the GM wanted him. So, it's going to be more of the same in Buffalo. I think that Brady can do a good job of the offense. Let's see who he brings in on the defensive side of the ball. But I think the bigger issues are in team building there. At 4, I have Stefanski. I like Stefanski. It left to be seen what they do at the quarterback position, but I think he brings a lot more stability and offensive prowess than what they had before. Raheem Morris, I think, is a great defensive coordinator, not meant to be a head coach.
Yep.
And Zach Robinson, I don't know. Maybe part of it was having Penix. The offense did look better in the latter half of the season. Maybe he has some success with Baker Mayfield, but I don't believe in
With
him
the with Kirk.
entirely.
With Kirk.
Yes, with
Yeah.
Kirk.
Baker.
Well, I said going with he's in
Oh,
Tampa
going.
Bay now. Going to
Oh
Tampa.
yeah. I see.
Yeah.
I was like
Yeah.
thinking Falcons stuff. I'm like,
No.
I was
No,
like
no, no, no. Maybe
Michael
maybe
Penix.
Zach can have some
I see.
success with
Yeah.
Baker
Yeah.
Mayfield, but I don't, he wasn't very successful in Atlanta. So I think Stefanski coming in, he had a lot of early success with Cleveland, but
Yeah.
I think he's just a good quality coach. At 3, I got Jesse Minter. I think he's one of the best young defensive minds. He has, some of the ties to Baltimore. Again, it does feel like, are some of these teams just getting stuck in the mud, bringing back guys that have already been there. But I think it was time for a change at Baltimore. Minter's going to have that defense flying around. He's going to do a lot better job than Zach Orr did. Obviously, Orr did a good job, in the latter half of the season, but Minter's going to have these guys flying. They're way too talented on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, got to see what they do there. There's some talks about maybe they promote T. Martin, their quarterback's coach, but they just need to utilize their weapons on offense. At 2, I got Robert Saleh. I think that, bringing in a defensive-minded coach with a young quarterback, people often question that, but I love the offensive coordinator hire in Brian Daboll. Daboll has been around with a lot of young quarterbacks, dating all the way kind of back to Brett Favre. So he's just been around, and he was going to help Cam Ward really evolve into something new. He did with Josh Allen, taking that gunslinger kind of plays outside of the system quarterback and getting him to thrive. I think Daboll will do a great job of that. And Saleh, you saw the job that he did in San Francisco with such a disheveled defense, and they played well enough to go that as far as they did in the playoffs. He's going to a team that kind of does lack some of the talent, but I think that he will coach them up. He's got guys like Jeff Simmons, and he'll probably do a better job than Denard Wilson did this past season. And then at number 1, it's Harbaugh. Harbaugh, he's the most successful coach on this list. He was obviously the number 1 candidate coming in for wherever he was going to go. He brings stability to New York, and I said to some of my friends, some of my Giants friends, you would trade anything to just win 10 games every single season, even if it meant you didn't have any playoff success.
Yeah.
Harbaugh will bring that, right? He'll get them to a position, maybe not this year, but maybe the next year, that they will win 8, 9, 10 games, in a division that is kind of wide open. Philly, I don't know how much belief I have in them moving forward. They might have to start to tear some things down with A.J. Brown, and they don't, they've failed to find an offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of open in that division. They hired Denard Wilson, who was the defensive coordinator for a bad defense last year, but his first year in Tennessee, they were a pretty good defense. So the biggest one, though, is going to be, who are they bringing as an offensive coordinator, right? All these coaches, you can say something about the coaches, but the staff that they bring in is almost more important. And what do they bring in for Jackson Dart? Is it Davis Webb? I hope it's not. I hope he's the OC in Denver. Outside of that, I've heard some other options that I don't love. I've heard Brian Johnson, who was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, who sucked and got fired. I've heard Justin Alton, who was the OC when Nathaniel Hackett was the Broncos head coach. Some bad options. I think T. Martin would be a good one, the Baltimore Ravens quarterback coach. But, with Monken leaving, and I didn't even really love Monken, they need to go outside of the hardball tree for this to be a home run hire. But he's obviously the number one head coach candidate above everyone else.
Yeah, I 100% agree on one there. 1 and 2, I'm same boat. Number 8 and 7, I had the same as well. Todd Monken and Jeff Hafley, both guys first head coaching experience, and neither of them. Obviously, Jeff Hafley is pretty new to the league. He only has, I want to say, 2 to 3 years of actual, and
he's been around
at least for the last, for recent NFL coordinator experience. He was there. Obviously, before that, Boston College, he was the head coach. At number 8, Todd Monken, though, I'm just really uninspired by him. Like, similar to you, I don't think his offense was anything great or crazy. And the only reason they ended up going with him was because they've missed out on absolutely everyone in this cycle. And
they scared them away.
Yeah, and you went and fired Stefanski, who was a solid head coach by all means, a 2-time Coach of the Year award winner, and you go and fire him. I don't know what they were expecting if any of these top guys were going to be there. I don't know if they knew that going in or if they thought they would be able to win those guys over, but you don't have the roster to appeal to these coaches that some of these other teams did. And it really was a big swing and miss for them. They end up with Monken. Maybe he turns it around, but this year, at least, I just don't see that turnaround happening for them. So they're at 8 for me. Number 7, obviously Jeff Hafley as well. Similar to what you said, just newer head coach. I think he can turn it around. And I love the Brian Daboll offensive coordinator hire for them. I think that's a really great move, especially on that offensive side of the ball with Cam Ward, who is a younger quarterback. Obviously, Daboll is going to coach him up and get him.
Wait, you said Hafley.
Was way ahead of myself here.
Yeah.
Apologies. Dolphins, obviously, they have Tua, so you got to figure out that situation. Apologies. I am interested to see what they do there, but I'm not a fan of the roster for Hafley. Maybe that's a sinking ship that they're gonna have to rebuild in the next year or two. Moving on, number 6, I had Joe Brady down at number 6. I do like the move. I think Joe Brady's a solid and good offensive mind, but I just don't love the continuity there. I've seen what happens with continuity as a Saints fan, going from Sean Payton to Dennis Allen for a few years. And yes, although like it appears nice on paper for the first year, you're just like, yeah, we needed a change of just total change of mindset going into that organization. And that's just not what Joe Brady is. So maybe he turns it around. Maybe he makes them into a true Super Bowl contender. But right now, I just don't see it as a crazy move. At number 5, I had Jesse Minter just because it's his first head coaching opportunity. So he's a little bit lower on my list than all of the next 4 guys, which are all former head coaches. Number 4, I had Mike McCarthy. I do like this move for the Steelers. I think that Mike McCarthy is a really solid head coach. He's going to get probably the Steelers similar to Mike Tomlin. He'll probably get them to the playoffs or get them right around that playoff bubble for the next 2-3 years, however long he's going to be a head coach. I will say it's also a good move because it likely helps them try to convince Aaron Rodgers for one more season as a quarterback in the NFL. Maybe he's already on his way out. Maybe he's convinced himself that he's done, but bringing McCarthy in at least gets you another chance at possibly having one more year with Aaron Rodgers. And whether you go get Ty Simpson or maybe they just run it back with the same quarterback room, that still gives Aaron Rodgers more Malik Willis to go. You go get that guy. That's all of those. Those are great opportunities for Aaron Rodgers to be a mentor for those young quarterbacks. Number 3, I had Kevin Stefanski. I just don't think that this is it's not an insane move by the Falcons, right? I think he's a solid coach, but he's also what has he done with the Browns in the last few years? I know that's not necessarily all him because he hasn't had the greatest team to coach, but at the same time, like he does have some say in how this team performs, and they haven't been great over the last few seasons. Number 2, I had Rob Sala as well. I think, and I was saying earlier, Brian Daboll, great hire for them. Cam Ward is going to be a great asset for Brian Daboll, and I think Rob Sala is going to be able to coach that defense up. And then number 1, nothing else to add to that John Harbaugh conversation. Really great hire for them immediately. As soon as he became available, he was the number 1 guy, and I think the Giants were probably the best opportunity for a head coach, right? You had a really solid offense, and the defense, the defensive line is already ridiculous. Maybe you add a couple pieces in that secondary, and they're a really scary defense really, really quick. But anyways, that'll do it for our are already filled positions. Ty, I want to ask you, which position do you think is better for a head coach, the Raiders or the Cardinals? And what do you think happens there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely the Raiders. You think about a team with the number one pick. You got Fernando Mendoza coming in. I think they have $100 million of cap space. Tom Brady's one of the owners, and you got some solid weapons, right? With Brock Bowers, with Genty, with Crosby if he sticks, right? They have a lot to improve on, and offensive line, the entire defense outside of Crosby, and obviously quarterback with maybe Mendoza coming in. But it when you compare that job to Arizona, where it's what do we do with Kyler Murray? The offense kind of lacks some talent, outside of Trey McBride. The receiver room, like, is Michael Wilson still here? Marvin Harrison hasn't lived up to the hype. The defense was terrible last year. It's just like, and they don't have a ton of cap, or at least in comparison to the Raiders either. It
Yeah.
depends on what happens with Kyler Murray. So, there's just a lot of less upside in the Arizona roster, and I think that the front office as well. We've kind of seen this. Just they cycle through the same things. Maybe part of it's ownership. Like, they just kind of cycle through this like level of mediocrity, right? Whether it dates back to Cliff Kingsbury, since Kurt Warner left, pretty much. I mean, except for that 1 year with Carson Palmer, they have just been mediocre to awful, right? They draft a quarterback at 10. The next year, they're drafting a quarterback at 1, going from Rosen to Kyler Murray. So there's just been a lot of, issues in Arizona, and same in the Raiders. But John Spytek, he's a good GM. He comes from that Tampa Bay brain trust, and Brady and him are on the same page, and it seems like Brady's pretty involved there. So I just believe in that environment a little bit more. Especially you get Mendoza, right? That's a huge the way that guy's played all season long. That's a huge bump to that team.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% agreeing with you here. I think the Raiders is it's a great opportunity for a head coach in comparison to the Cardinals. Obviously, the divisions for both of these teams are really, really solid competition on both sides. You have 3 playoff teams, level teams for the Raiders to go to compete against. Obviously, the Chiefs missed this year, but I think they can be a competitor next year. And then the Cardinals, obviously, you're going against 3 playoff teams with 2 of them probably deserving of being a Super Bowl team, right? Like, I mean, you had 2 teams that were absolutely insane this season, and the Rams have 2 first round picks. Like, they're adding to their team. The Seahawks are probably going to lose their offensive coordinator, but I don't think that's going to be the
Maybe
biggest.
to the Raiders.
Yes, and maybe to the Raiders. I think the Raiders. I was gonna say is the Raiders are a perfect opportunity for Kubiak in this system. I think it's very similar to Kellen Moore coming to the Saints after the Super Bowl last year. It's a very solid offensive coordinator mind going to a team that's still rebuilding a little bit, but after next season, I think that's really when they take a leap into competing. Right? I think next season you go get Mendoza, or this offseason you get Mendoza, like you said. You get him, just get used to the NFL for a season, and then you truly take a leap the next year. But I do think Kubiak is going to be the guy for the Raiders. And honestly, for the Cardinals, I think they should have kept Gannon for another season. I think they fired him to try to just reset. But at the same time, it wasn't really his fault that this team was just as pathetic as it was. Defense obviously struggled. You said that he is a defensive coordinator. That is his fault. But at the same time, they just really don't have a whole lot of talent on that team. And it was tough to blame him for what happened.
Look at the candidates for Arizona too, right? Right
Yeah,
now, with Campanelli staying in Jacksonville, it's Raheem Morris and LaFleur. If they go with Raheem Morris, that's a terrible move because you saw what happened in Atlanta. It just seems like you're signing up for mediocrity.
yeah,
LaFleur, I could see it. I could see some, the room for growth there. Maybe they take Ty Simpson at 3. Obviously, that's a little early, but if they believe in him and they bring in an offensive guy, but yeah, I just their candidates aren't great, and then I think your point about the division too. The Raiders do have a bit of an easier division, right? Because the
definitely.
Chiefs, they struggled a ton this offseason or this past season. Let's see how Mahomes, does he come back, healthy? Is he the same self? What's up with Kelsey? They got a lot of question marks. The Chargers can't stay healthy. Their offensive line's terrible, and they get blasted every year that they make the playoffs. There's a little bit of a easier road to maybe becoming a wild card team in that division versus San Francisco, LA, and Seattle. I mean, unless Stafford retires and the Rams completely fall apart without him, which I imagine they'll add a quarterback in the draft or free
Yeah.
agency or the trade, that division seems like they're more stable for the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting for the Rams, like you just mentioned it. If Stafford retires, I just don't see it happening. But if he did, I mean, they definitely could end up taking a little bit of a step back. But there's definitely enough players, especially in the quarterback position, that McVay could go get someone and just plug them in and still be solid. And the craziest thing was we're doing a top 10 mock after this. Number 12, Daniel Jeremiah in his first mock had Mekhi Lemon going to the Rams. And if they add Mekhi Lemon, then the offense becomes even more unstoppable. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough for any team going to that division for a little while. Anyways, Ty, moving on to our mock draft for the top 10 teams here. At number 1, you got the Raiders, obviously. 2, you got the Jets. 3, Cardinals. 4, Titans. 5, Giants. 6, Browns. 7, Commanders. 8, Saints. 9, Chiefs. And 10, the Bengals. Ty, number 1, it's going to be Mendoza here. Everyone
Yep.
knows that. So we'll get him off the board. But at number 2, that's really the first interesting situation here. What are your thoughts on the Jets and where do you think they would go?
Yeah, I think with Dante Moore coming back to school, right, this team's got to start to think, okay, maybe they add Kyler Murray, maybe they add a Malik
Mhm.
Willis, but we're building for the future, right? They have a ton of first-round picks this year and next year, right? They got a ton of picks from the Quinn Williams and Sauce Gardner trades. I think that you start with just best player available at this point,
Yep.
and that's going to be Arvell Reese. Caleb Downs, I know he's ranked as the top guy here, but think about premium positions. Edge rusher, which Arvell's probably going to play. He's probably not going to play inside. He's going to be more of an edge guy, is a premium position. Arvell Reese has the ability to kind of transform this defense, under Aaron Glenn and whoever their new defensive coordinator ends up being. I think they hired someone, but I wasn't familiar with him. But anyways, Arvell Reese is the type of guy that you come in and change the defense because he's that stud pass rusher.
Yeah, and I just think Aaron Glenn's gonna want to add like he's just gonna want the biggest dog on defense possible, and that's who Arvell Reese is, especially at the top of this draft. Maybe you surprise some people and you go Ruben Bain over him, right? Ruben Bain going to the combine is the biggest question mark right now with his arm length. Obviously, if he comes in with a sub 30.5-inch arm length, like that's gonna scare a lot of teams away, and that could force him down below the top 15. Like it is a huge question mark next to Ruben Bain right now, but Arvell Reese is that guy, and I think he will go at number 2 as well. Moving on to number 3, the Cardinals here. Anytime I run a mock draft on PFF, they have them going Jeremiah Love at number 3. As a Saints fan, if Jeremiah Love went at number 3, I would be absolutely distraught because first of all, I don't think the Cardinals are in a spot right now where you go and get a running back in the draft and it fixes all your worries. You need to go O-line, a premium position, like you said, O-line, so tackle, quarterback, or cornerback, or edge. I think those are the 4 positions that are really like the premier positions in the league, where if you have one of those guys, it can really change your team on either side of the ball. And obviously, Jeremiah Love is not one of those positions, so I don't see them going there. They could go defensive line. I don't really see that happening, though. It's tough. I
Where
think
the hell are the
the
tackles?
tackles are really low on PFF. So Francis Magoa, I'm gonna butcher that name every
Malaga?
time. Yeah, Mawagoa. There we go. I think
Francis.
Francis. We'll call him Francis. And Spencer Fano, however you
Fano.
pronounce it. Both of those
We'll
guys are
practice
really,
for
really
the
gonna.
off season.
Yeah, I haven't dove deep into these guys yet, so for pronunciations and everything. But anyways, either of those guys are going to be the guys for each of these 3 and 4 picks, I believe. Whichever guy comes out on top throughout this draft process, that's going to be the guy here. I do believe Francis, though, is my pick after watching the championship game. I think he had a really, really solid game, looked really solid. So I would pick him. But Ty, what do you think? What do you think? Spencer or Francis here at number 3?
Yeah, I think it'll come down to just at the end of the day preference as
Yeah.
we go through the draft process. I like Spencer Fondo a lot, but both these guys have been on the map for a little bit. Like you look
Yeah.
back, the way too early mock drafts like Spencer Fondo and Francis Malaga have been on the radar. I'm gonna go with Francis Malaga. He obviously had a great performance in just that whole playoff run. They were kind of the underdog as the last team in, so let's go with the Miami guy.
And then what do you got here at 4 for the Titans?
Yeah, I think they need to go out and support their star quarterback. They need to get a real receiver, right? I like Alec Manor. I think he's an option. I think Calvin Ridley's they're going to move on from him this offseason. Why not go out and get the guy who, I think I I'll say this. I think Makai Lemon is the best receiver in this class. I think separation wise, his ability, to catch contested balls as a smaller guy is awesome. But a lot of teams are going to be drawn to the size, the performance, the production, and the hype around Carnell Tate. I think it's going to be Carnell Tate here. I think for me, Tate and Lemon are pretty close, and then Titans right after, or Tyson is right after them. I think you get Carnell Tate in there with Cam Ward. That's going to be a really good recipe for that guy. He needs a weapon, right? He needs
Yeah.
a go-to guy that he can go to. Ironmanner's a good 2 or 3. Carnell Tate's going to be that one for them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree here. I've been surprised. Some people were picking linemen for him, right? He did get sacked a ridiculous amount of times this season, and there was a lot of pressure in his face. But if you get him another receiver, we've seen him make just ridiculous plays with his arms and his legs on the run, things like that under pressure. He can still make plays under pressure. And so if you go get a receiver that can get open, has a big body like Carnell Tate, in addition to Alec Ironmanner, who you mentioned, both of those guys can be jump ball guys and make plays all across the field. And I think that would be a really great addition for them.
They have a ton of money too, so they can go out and add
Yeah.
offensive line in for agency. That maybe that's an easier recipe for them, right? Because it's going to be hard for them to compete for some of the top dog receivers, but it's they'll be able to bring in some of the better offensive linemen by throwing money at them, and then bring in a young receiver. I think a young receiver with a young quarterback is a good recipe too.
Yeah, and it'll be honestly, it'll come down to Dable, what he prefers. Maybe he prefers O line over receiver, but I think just
They
getting
took
whatever.
Neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever he thinks this quarterback needs that will benefit him the most, that's where they're going to go. And I think either or is going to be a great spot for them. They're at the most opportune position right now. I mean, they don't need a quarterback, so they're not worried about that. They don't necessarily need D linemen. They're not worried about that. And I don't think the Cardinals are taking anyone that they're going to possibly consider taking. So it makes the most sense going Carnell Tate or who was the other tackle? Spencer Fano. So either of those guys there, number 4. Number 5, this is where it gets a little bit interesting as well. The Giants coming in with John Harbaugh at the helm. They could really go a multitude of positions here. You can go O-line, you can go a lot of people have them going receiver. I just don't see them doing that. I don't think receiver is the biggest need. Right now, the guy that I love for them is Mansour Delane. And I think through that combine process, he's going to really heat up and be a guy that a lot of teams consider that top dog. Obviously, Jermod McCoy is right there as well. He's done really well. It's going to be between those two, in my opinion. I think they go corner here, add to that defense, you're going to get pressure on quarterbacks. If you can get guys that are locking down receivers in addition to that pressure, it makes it excruciating as a quarterback to make things happen. And I think that cornerback position is one of those premier positions that we mentioned earlier. So it would be between Mansour and Jermod, in my opinion. Mansour, I believe, has more size than McCoy. Let me double check on that. Is 6 foot.
He's 6
Ooh,
foot, and McCoy might be
I could be
5'10".
wrong. 6 foot
No,
as well.
6 foot.
Shit.
Let me throw this out there for you, and I've
Go
heard
ahead,
some
Ty.
rumors about this. John Harbaugh has talked a ton about what Kyle Hamilton was to that defense and the chess piece
Ooh,
that he
Caleb Downs.
was. There have been rumors that they are enamored with Caleb Downs and his ability. He's a bigger guy. Can he play safety? He could play. He play deep safety. He could play box safety. He could be that big nickel. He could be that chess piece for that defense, right? We talked about they need to add to the secondary. Their outside corners actually aren't too bad. Cordell Flott is pretty good. Maybe
Debo.
yep,
Yeah.
Adebo is pretty good. The struggle really has been in that slot area. Can they add a Caleb Downs? And he's that guy for them.
Yeah, that would be an interesting move too, because that is the thing with Caleb Downs, right? Is those premier positions that we talk about or position value, right? You get to the safety position, but he's more of a do-it-all kind of guy, like Kyle Hamilton, like you just mentioned. Could Caleb Downs fall in the draft? Like you see here on PFF, he is ranked number 1 in the whole entire draft class. And I think a lot of guys have him there. Him and Jeremiah Love are probably the 2 most talented players in this draft. But when you look at positional value, which is what NFL teams have kind of seemed to value more than just pure talent, you see these guys fall a little bit. And that's what makes this so interesting, this decision here. Because yes, like I just said, their defense is, in my eyes, what needs to have the addition right here at number 5. So Caleb Downs, Mansour Delane, or Jermod McCoy, those are my 3 guys or two guys, and Ty, you add Caleb Downs. Let's go Caleb Downs. If you're hearing that they're a little bit more enamored by him, I think that's a great move either way. It's just personally, it's just the value that was kind of dragging me off from him, but I think that's still a really, really solid pick for them. Ty, here at number 6, the Browns. They have a lot of holes that need to be filled. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I actually just saw a rumor that they could be exploring Ty Simpson or Malik Willis this offseason. They're going to add a quarterback to the room. And I believe they have 2 first-round picks in this draft. So
Check.
because they have Jacksonville's pick.
Yes, 25 or 24.
So it,
I might
it does. Yeah, I
hold up.
think it's
24.
24. So it does depend on how much Ty Simpson kind of rises in this draft process. They need a lot.
Mhm.
I'm tempted to say that they would take Ty Simpson at 6. I don't know. What do you think here?
Ooh. See, if it's not Ty Simpson, I think they go receiver. I think you go Jordan Tyson here because right now you have no receivers to throw to. And
Yeah.
like you said, if they go Malik Willis, and you could get Malik Willis reasonably for what, $30 million, I think that's kind of the going rate for him after his performance this season. If you get him for $30 million, you get Jordan Tyson. You already have Harold Fannin. You have Jerry Jeudy. I believe he's still going to be there after this season. I
Yeah.
don't think he's a free agent. You potentially have like a solid offense you can build around. Quinshon Judkins obviously went down. Dylan Sampson is still, I think, going to be a solid running back for them. I think that could give them a really solid opportunity to succeed. But I do think that Ty Simpson, if, like you just said, if he moves up across this combine process that we're going to see in the next few weeks, he definitely could be there. I think that's
Yeah,
100%
and
real.
if they sign Malik Willis, they could definitely add Ty Simpson later on too. So let's go
Yeah.
Jordan Tyson here. I like it. They need a receiver, and right now I think you could get Ty Simpson in that 20s range.
Yeah, especially it's 24. I mean, the only team that really poses a threat for Ty Simpson is the Steelers, and that just kind of right at this point in
Trade
time
above
you
him.
have at this point in time, yeah, and you can trade up. At this point in time,
Or
they
the
have
Jets.
Aaron Rodgers, Jets too. That's a
But they had the draft. The thing is, Cleveland has the draft capital to move up in
mhm,
the draft, trade with a team like Baltimore, who could be, looking to add some more capital to build
yeah.
around that team and doesn't need a pick 14 or something like that.
Yeah, and like you said, like these teams are probably going to be competing over guys like Malik Willis and a couple other quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Malik Willis could be the guy for the Jets, even so. Whichever team gets him or doesn't get him, that could be the team that doesn't move up and go get a quarterback and Ty Simpson after these first few picks. Number 7 here. This is where I honestly have no clue where the Commanders could go. They need a lot of talent in a lot of different places because they're an older team after last season. You go to the NFC Championship game and then you go all in. And a lot of the pieces that you go all in on completely flop. I don't think that it paid out well for them. I think Deebo Samuel was a solid option, but obviously underperformed this season, just due to injuries and things like that being available. Here, in my opinion, if we Ty, just because of the way we've done this mock so far, with the way that we've kind of been, positional value, maybe teams fall in love with guys and go get guys above their value. Sonny Styles is a guy that really, really calls to me here at number 7. I do think that he's going to be a guy that teams are going to say is an all pro after his first season and will be a similar to Fred Warner of a guy that can do absolutely everything on the field, is just a general. You get him next to Bobby Wagner for a season or two. Bobby Wagner coaches him up. He gets tips from a Hall of Fame level linebacker after already being a great talent. I mean, that gets really scary. He's a guy that I could see them going after. Outside of that, I just don't. Maybe they go an edge. I think they could go edge here. I know a lot of people love David Bailey. I believe he's the guy that doesn't wear any drip,
No
as
drip.
people, as people like to call it. He's a guy I could see going here. Definitely is edge, but Sonny
Yeah.
Styles is just so talented. Ty, what are your thoughts?
I think there's 4 guys here. I think they could definitely consider Jeremiah Love, and I know you don't want them to, but
Oh
they
yeah,
need to
I could see that
consider
too.
him because he's a premier talent, maybe not at a
Mhm,
premier position, but they lacked anything in the run game. And maybe, some of that is scheme, maybe that some of that is
mhm.
O-line. So they'll definitely consider him here. I think Bain is an option, but the smaller
Proven, yep.
arms make me think that maybe he falls and David Bailey would be an option above him. I like the Sonny Styles pick though, because you think about a Dan Quinn defense, right? Go all the way back to Atlanta when they went to the Super Bowl. Deion Jones was a very
That's
athletic
a great
linebacker,
callback. Yeah.
an absolute stud, and he could fly around. That's the type of guy that Sonny Styles is, and that's one of the best defenses that Dan Quinn has had. I like Sonny Styles here.
I love it. Yeah, no,
Converted
I do
safety
think,
into a linebacker just like Deion Jones was. It
yep.
makes a lot of sense.
That's a great callback, Ty. I didn't even think about that with the connections there to Quinn. I think that's a great move. At number 8 here, I said it earlier and I'll say it again. Jeremiah Love paired with Tyler Shuck creates the Saints to an opportunity for them to become division winners very, very honestly, if they go Jeremiah Love here, I think they're the favorites for the division next season. And I think that's sort of wild to say just based off of, the last few years. But this season, they ended really, really strong in comparison to all the other divisional teams. And you go get Jeremiah Love, who's, in my opinion, the second best player in this draft next to Caleb Downs. So it would be a great move for them. I think the Saints go Jeremiah Love, especially with Kellen Moore as the head coach. What are your thoughts, Ty?
I feel like receiver is a bigger need for them, and they're in a great
Yeah, it's
spot to
fair.
grab a guy like Mekhi Lamone. They could come back next season, whether they have Kamara or not. I think they could rely on a guy like Devin Neal
Yeah,
to step
definitely.
up and be that number one option. I think Olave obviously had a great season, but outside of him, there's room for growth, right? Devon Bailey is 28 years old. Obviously, he looked
Mhm.
to have a decent connection with Shuck because they're both old men. But I think Mekhi would add a layer to this offense that he is an all-pro type of receiver to me right away, right? And I think he's kind of going under the same arc that JSN did when he came out, right? JSN slipped a lot farther than
Yeah.
people initially thought because he was so awesome in college. He ends up at Seattle, and look at what he's done now. But Kyle Lamone's a similar great route running receiver, good from the slot, right? But can play outside. Has the ability to make those contested catches. JSN's a little bit of a bigger guy, but I would like Lamone there. But yeah, Jeremiah Love is a hard talent to pass up on.
Yeah, I think he would be a great pick for the Saints. I would not be upset at that at all. I think if you go him and then instead of Jeremiah Love and you go running back later in the draft to try to just kind of add to that room, I don't think that's a bad decision at all. If you go get Jeremiah Love here, it's kind of a decision. I think they go after Alec Pierce this offseason in the free agency period. I think that would be a really great addition for them next to Vele and Olave. It would really provide a lot of great opportunities for Shuck. Anyways, moving on, Ty, here at 9, you got the Chiefs, divisional rival, obviously, for your Broncos. What are your thoughts on them and where do you think they go?
Yeah, they have running back and receiver here. I don't understand the receiver that much because they do have Xavier Worthy and Rashi Rice. Obviously, depending if Rashi Rice gets
Yeah.
arrested or not, but and running back is definitely a need. But the biggest need is offensive line, right? They failed to protect Patrick Mahomes all season long. Their entire offensive line outside of Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith is terrible. And I think they go out and they get a stud in Spencer Fanu to protect him. Maybe Simmons develops on the other side, but it's time to move on from Jawan Taylor because that guy sucks.
The false start king. That's what I like to call him.
Yeah.
It's actually insane what is going on there in Kansas City. I just think obviously I predicted them 9-8 semi trolling on TikTok and it came to light and it came to reality. Still a victory lap for me there, but I do think this team you go receiver, I think that possibly is a good move, right? I mean, if you go get Makai Lemon like that would be a great weapon in addition to those two guys you mentioned for Patrick Mahomes, but really getting an O lineman does help this team a whole lot. Anyways, moving on, you got the Bengals here. Their defensive side of the ball has struggled mightily, mightily. And you do have Trey Hendrickson, right? That is a great player. He's going to be there a couple more seasons. Their O line is pretty.
He's a free
Yeah,
agent.
he could be gone after this year. Actually, yeah, you are right. You are right.
Yeah,
He
they
could be
did the
gone
1 year
after this
extension.
season. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I don't think he'll be back. That creates a massive need at edge on a defense that struggled just mightily this season. Absolutely horrific. At second half of the season, played a little bit better. I'll give them their props where props are due. They did have a solid, at least a solider second half of the season on defense. Offensive side of the ball, you need interior O lineman help, but here at this point in the draft, that's not where you're going, right? You don't have interior O line premium guys that you're going to go here in the top 10 picks. Instead, I think they're going to go defensive side of the ball, and that leaves these three guys at top here: Ruben Bain, David Bailey, Peter Woods. All three of those guys are really, really solid. You could also go either of those corners that I mentioned earlier, Jermod McCoy and Mansour Delane. But in my eyes, I think they go Ruben Bain. Until the combine proves otherwise and he becomes, the runt that no one actually wants because of his arm length. Ruben Bain Jr. in the playoffs had some monster plays in both the run game and the pass game. And I just think that's a defensive talent that you want to pass up here at 10. So give me Ruben Bain here. What are your thoughts on that, Ty?
Yeah, I think if one of those tackles fall, I know that they
Yeah.
have Mims and Orlando Brown. They definitely need to explore that because protecting Joe Burrow should be, objective number one this offseason. How
Definitely.
do we add around him? But yeah, with Trey Hendrickson likely out, that defense needs help. They need help across from Shamar Stewart. Obviously, left to be seen if he's even an option for this team. But yeah, I think it's between Bailey and Bain here. I wouldn't go interior defensive line. It's a little high for that, especially given, the other guys on the board and some of the need there, right? Like Miami last year, right? Kenneth Grant, decently high, but they had edge rushers. Obviously, they traded away Jalen Phillips. So I like the Ruben Bain pick here. Again, the short arms do scare me a little bit. And I think the NFL might start to get scared away by short arms after we saw guy on the flip side, Will Campbell, kind of get exposed all last Sunday.
It was a bad rep.
Nick Bonito had that guy bent over and, eating dirt. I can't believe that whiff. That was the craziest whiff I've ever seen. But anyways, yeah, short arms, it's definitely an area of concern. And I like David Bailey. I think they're both kind of neck and neck for me. But yeah, Bain was a game changer all season long. I think he had like 3 interceptions this season too. So
he might have had a few. I didn't pay too close attention to his stats, but yeah, every time I watched a Miami game, he was making plays, and I think he was making his presence felt, and that's all you want to really see. But yeah, that'll do it for our mock draft and for our episode here. I'll give a rundown of our mock draft so you guys out there listening can get a recap. At number 1, we got Fernando Mendoza. At number 2, we got Arvel Reese. 3, Francis Moigoa. At number 4, you got Carnell Tate. 5, Caleb Downs. 6, Jordan Tyson. 7, Sonny Styles. 8, Jeremiah Love. 9, Spencer Fano. And 10, Ruben Bain Jr. As I said before, we're going to be doing a deep dive into each of the position groups going to this draft after the Super Bowl. We'll probably start the week or two after the Super Bowl, go from there, kind of put some feelers out there and make sure we kind of schedule it, line it up with the draft, make sure we have a good, setup for this offseason for you guys out there. So you have good content every single week. Next week, obviously, we're going to be breaking down the Super Bowl for you guys. It's a really exciting matchup. You got the Seahawks taking on the Patriots in San Francisco, or Santa Clara, I should say. But that is going to be a lot of fun to break down. You guys know where to check us out on social media at Jenks Island or wherever you get your podcasts at Jenks Island as well. We'll see you guys next week.